There comes a point in every man's life where he comes to a turning point. There are no more masks to wear. There are no more places to hide. I had tried it all. New cities, new plans, new schemes, even new continents. But what I found out is I carried with me the same brokenness, the same anger, and the same chains. You see, you can outrun people and places, but you can never outrun your own broken heart. This part of my story is where my rebellion collided with God's relentless love, where forgiveness wasn't a weakness, but it was actually the very first act in healing a broken manhood. Here, God began rebuilding me from the inside out, giving me a new name, a new identity, and a new destiny. Tune in for this next segment of my testimony. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy, Coach Wulu, and welcome to part 4 of my testimony, The Turning Point, Faith, Forgiveness, and the Father That I Never Knew. So I really appreciate you guys being with me. I mean, it has been a tremendous blessing so far. I've had so many people reach out to me with just love and support, allowing me to know how my own personal testimony has impacted their lives. And I pray that if you're tuning into part 4 and you haven't seen 3, 2, and 1, then you definitely want to hit the pause button on this one, go back and listen to whichever one that you haven't heard, because you want to make sure that you are caught up to where we are in my story. So, where I had left off in my last story, I had been sharing with you just the immense mercy of God demonstrated to me when I was almost caught selling crack cocaine, but God showed me mercy in not allowing for me to be caught, And so, I wish I could say that at this point in my life, I was ready. I was ready to give my heart to God, because I can tell you, as I sat on that couch, as I consider just how close I came to going to prison for a very long time, I realized that it was nothing but the mercy of God that had kept me. But unfortunately, at that time, I was not ready, to give my life to God. But God, He has a way of demonstrating His mercy even more the deeper that we go into rebellion. So I won't get into everything that happened, but the very next day after that time where we were almost arrested, everything that I had got stolen. Everything. And so I literally came to this breaking point where I needed to figure out what I was going to do next in life. And there's a lot that I wish I can go into every single part of my testimony, but some parts I just have to skip just for the sake of time. So there's a lot that happened between that time and the next event that I'm about to tell you. And so I came to this point to where, my mother, God bless her, who's no longer with us, she's considering what can I do for my baby boy? Like, I need to do something for him because he's headed in the wrong direction. And at this time, her and my brother had actually started a business in the country of Uganda. Now, none of my family members are from this country, from that particular country. As if you heard it in part 1 of my testimony, my father's from Nigeria, but that's West Africa. Uganda's in East Africa. But my mom had some contacts there, and her and my brother had started a business. So she wanted to send me down there to start a new business, to run the business that was currently going on, and to find out where we can buy some gold and some diamonds and some precious metals. So now we are in the year 2006. I'm 22 years old, and so I make it down there, and I'm running the business. I'm looking for precious gold, precious metals, so that I could purchase it and bring it back to America. And we were going to try to make a killing off of this stuff that we found. And when I got there, there was a person there who my mom had running the business before I got there. And I was just supposed to come over and kind of take over the main leadership while this individual was to continue playing a supporting role. So we get there, and God is trying to prevent me from coming into the type of money that I was hoping to come into, because I really had dreams of grandeur at this point, because I was like, man, if I could get my hands on precious stones and precious metals, and we were to purchase them there and bring them back to America, we were going to make a killing. And so, I had dollar signs all in my eyes as I considered the prospect and the possibilities of what awaited us. So God always has his plans. He always has his ways of inserting himself into our plans to try to redirect us back to the pathway that he desires for us to be. So my mom had sent me down with this gold testing kit. Now, mind you, I've never seen raw gold before. I've only ever seen it in earrings and rings and stuff like that. But I've never seen it in a raw form. So we got linked up with these guys, and these guys, they brought us the gold, uh, and we tested it. I tested it, and the test came back positive. And so I'm thinking like, man, and I forget how much it was. It was like a bag, like a bag of gold, but I forget what the weight was. So, hmm. So as I continue to play with this thing, I'm like, I don't know. I've never seen raw gold before, but I'm like, there's something different about this. And so the more that I did research, the more that I realized that real gold is supposed to be soft. Like real gold in its raw form is actually malleable. You can actually bend it, as long as it hasn't been mixed with any other type of metal. And so upon further research, what I found that they had did was they took another metal and they had coated it with gold. And that's the reason why when I had tested it, it had came back as positive. And so, needless to say, the dollar signs that I had in my eyes, things weren't working out the way that I had hoped that they would. And I was planning on spending a very long time here. And so, different situations just kind of happened while I was there to really just kind of awaken me to this environment in which I was hoping to really make it big. Before I kind of get to the turning point in my time in East Africa, that was uh kind of like one of the last steps right before my conversion experience. I just want to tell you just one of the crazy experiences that I had while I was there. So we had a shop. I was on the strip that had a bunch of shops. And you start to make friends with different people. They got, shops not too far from you. And so I had a friend, me and him are just talking. It's nighttime. Me and him are having a conversation. We're just chatting. He's kind of like right here and I'm talking to him. So whatever's going over here, I can't even see what's going on. And so as I'm talking to him, all of a sudden, just I see this guy run by. And as he runs by, I'm looking to see like why where is he running to? And all of a sudden, because I'm not looking to the left, I see this crowd of people chasing him. And so, I tap my friend. I'm like, hey, like what's going on? Why they chasing him? And he was like, it is probably a thief. And I'm like, what are they going to do if they catch him? He said, they are going to kill him. I said, they're gonna kill him for stealing something? And so he kind of leaves to go and kind of check to see what it was. He's talking to some of the other locals to get like the inside story of what happened. So he comes back to me and he tells me that the story that he had heard was that the man had stolen a bicycle. And I said, "You're going to kill this man for stealing a bicycle?" And he said, in America, you ride bicycles for fun, but here it is a man's livelihood. And it is true because, there are a couple different ways of traveling in many places of Africa. Obviously, this is the old school. You could just walk. You could catch a vehicle. You could catch a motorcycle, or you could get a bicycle. And what happens is it's there's this bicycle and it has a seat at the back. You sit on the seat at the back and they will ride you around wherever you want to go in town. And that was the type of bicycle that was stolen. So, secretly in my heart, I am hoping that this guy makes it. And it's what's crazy to me is he is outrunning like 30 people. He's outrunning all of them. And when you then what ended up happening is, people are kind of like on the side of the road like this with their arms crossed, and they're watching him as he runs. And as soon as he gets close, they take off running and they're chasing him. So I mean, it literally grew from initially like 10, 10, 15 people chasing him to like now he has like 30, 40 people chasing him. And one of the times where he had circled the city because he's trying to find a way to escape, and he literally comes back right around the same area that he had run the first time. And in my heart, I'm like, run, run, run. And he turns around to see how far the people are behind him. And there's a pothole in the road, and he hits it and he falls. And I'm like, this guy's done. He's done. And so they begin to start to beat this guy. They begin to start to hit him with rocks and sticks. And what was really crazy to me is the fact that there were like 10, 11, and 12-year-olds in this crowd. And so all of a sudden I see two people walking from this direction. They're beating him over here to the right, but you have people coming from the left, and one of them has a tire in his hand, and the other one has a container that they usually put water in, or in this case, gasoline. But I didn't know what they were doing. So I tapped my friend and I said, "Hey," I said, what are these two people doing over here? And what are they going to do?" And he said, "They are probably going to burn him." I said, "They're going to burn him for stealing a bicycle." And then he began to start to explain to me how in this country, how people would get arrested. And when they got arrested, they would, because police aren't making a whole lot of money, they would pay the police something and they would be like out on the streets like a couple days later. And so people got tired of that. And so they started to practice mob justice. So, you know, I tell you, I tell you this part of the story, um, because it is amazing what human nature is capable of when it is divorced from God. And as you have listened to my testimony, as you have listened to my story thus far, the things that I never would have thought that I was capable of doing was only because I didn't realize just how depraved human nature is when it is disconnected from God. And that is something that's absolutely important that I hope that you yourself will pick up. And that is this: you may hear my story and you may think that there are certain things that you are not capable of. But if you remove yourself far enough from God, you will find yourself doing things that you never thought you were capable of. So moving to the time to where I'm about to kind of conclude my time on this continent, I am with the person who my mom originally had running the business. I am with one of the workers that had been working before I had even got there, and his little brother, who my mom had been paying for his school fees. And so his brother and the person who had been running the business before I got there are having this discussion with the young man because, there was something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was something that he had did wrong while he was at school. And so as I'm listening to them chastise him, I chimed in and I said, listen, hey, I said, my mom is paying for your school fees. And, if she knew what you were doing, you know, it's not good. So I said, you really need to wise up because my mom is trying to help to put you through school. And this is what he said to me. He said, I'm not the one that you need to worry about. He said, you need to worry about James because he's stealing from you. I was like, what? I said, he's stealing from me. And of course, the atmosphere in the room changed because I don't think they knew that he was about to say that. And so that led to a point where I'm trying to talk to James, what's going on? Like, what's this thing that he's talking about that you're stealing? So to make a long story short, what ends up happening is he ends up getting locked up. I have a friend at the time who works at the police station, and he locks him up. Now, I need you to kind of appreciate what I'm about to tell you here in a moment. So this guy James, when I first I was the first time that I was there in Africa, I was there for 6 months. And I said, you know what? I'm here. I'm gonna start working out. And so I started doing push-ups while I was there. And before I left there, I could do 1,000 push-ups in one day. So about maybe halfway in, where maybe I'm only able to do 500 push-ups, James begins to start to work out with me. And as he's working out with me, he starts to get really muscular. And then he gets locked up. And he's only locked up for 2 weeks. That's it. Just 2 weeks. And when his father sells a cow in order to get him out of lockup. And when he comes out, he has lost so much weight. It was like unbelievable. I'm like, man, like I'm thinking to myself, like, what did they do to you in there? And so anyway, I'm trying to talk to him. I'm trying to say, listen, my family will forgive you, but we just need you to be honest about what's going on. And so he kept maintaining his innocence that he didn't do nothing. So he disappears. Now, mind you, me and this guy are sharing a place together, from the time that I've got there. And he disappears for a couple days. And the next thing you know, he shows up at my front door one day with 2 police officers. And I'm like a little bit like weirded out because I'm like, why is he at my front door with 2 police officers? And so the police officers are like, listen, we have been told here by James that you have been stealing from him, and we need to take you into custody and take you down to the police station. So, I'm like, what? Steal? I said, I'm an American. I said, what would I need to steal from him for? Now, what I didn't know at the time was that they were actually in on this whole thing with him, which I didn't know at the time. And so anyway, they were about to put me in handcuffs, and some of the people that we lived around were, who had knew that James had gotten locked up. They were defending me. They were defending me vehemently at this time. And so they didn't put me into cuffs, but they took me to the police station, and they begin to start to ask me all kinds of questions. And what I found out, that this is what made the guy's story believable. What ended up happening was my mom and my brother started the business initially while she was still down there. But anytime new shipments needed to be purchased or new things needed to be done, she would Western Union him money. And whenever she Western Union him money, whose name do you think was on the receipt? It was his name. And so now, and these were receipts I had never seen before, because I looked through some of the different paperwork and stuff when I got there. But these paperwork, he was hiding this paperwork somewhere. And so he pulled it out at that opportune moment. And so the police were talking about how they were going to lock me up. They were going to lock me up. Now, mind you, I just told you what it was like for him being locked up for 2 weeks in a prison in Africa. And so I'm saying to myself, I ain't about to get locked up in a foreign country. Not happening. And so man, there's so much more that happened, and I can't go into all of the details. So needless to say, they took us back to the place that me and him had been sharing, and he started to take the stuff that quote unquote belonged to him, which he told the police officers were his. And some of that stuff I had literally just brought down. So there was no way that it was his, because I know I brought it down. And then the police, they kind of looked at me and they said, we need something for our troubles. And so I took the little bit of money that I had and I paid the police off, and they left. So mind you, at this point, prior to this whole situation happening, I was supposed to renew my visa, and I was thinking about renewing it for like another 6 months and staying there for a year, because I was enjoying my time there up to that point. There was I was it there was I was really enjoying my time in this place until that happened. And that was a part of the providence of God to move me away from where I was at, where I was living very comfortable, where it was very cheap to live, where I was getting into a lot of trouble. Because there's a lot of trouble to get into when you come down with American money. I mean, you could do a lot of stuff while you're there. And so anyway, I end up flying back to America, and I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, what am I doing with myself? Like, what am I doing with myself? Like, what is going on with my life? And so, I'm at a point to where one night, me and my older brother, who I had always looked up to, I'd always looked up to my older brother, and me and him get into a huge fight. It almost got physical. And I remember, because I'd always looked up to my brother, it just really angered me that me and him kind of were at each other like that. And so I go and get me a bottle of vodka, and I just sit there and I just drink the whole bottle by myself. And so I'm sitting there, pissy drunk, and I'm considering my life. And I remember I just sat there and I reviewed my life. This is 2000 and uh the end of 2007. Actually. This is the year that we're in now, 2007. And I sat there and I just reviewed my life for the last 10 years as I'm sitting there drunk. And I say, what do you have to show for your life? What do you have to show for managing your own life? And as I considered where I was at, I realized that I literally had nothing to show for running my own life. And so, in the midst of me being drunk at this moment, I decided to do something that I had never done. Now, those of you who've listened to part one and part two of my testimony, you've heard what it was like growing up in my father's household. And even though I had left my father's household, there was still a degree of respect that I still showed him. I don't know if it was training, fear. I really don't remember, but I had never really told my father how I felt about all of the stuff that had happened in the house to me and my sister. And so, as I'm in this vulnerable moment and I'm drunk, I call. I called my father. And, something you got to understand is that, especially as a young child, um, when my father talks, you listen, and he rarely stops to listen to you talk. And so I go into this whole spiel with my father about how I felt about all the stuff that happened to us in the house as a young child. And the Lord used something in this moment to utterly break me, to utterly break me. I as my father was silent and he listened to what I was sharing. Um Once I finished, this is what he said to me. He said, "If I did all of those things to you," he said, "I hope it hurt." And he hung up the phone. And I'm going to tell you, there was something so primal, so like the little child in me that still had not been healed, that just utterly broke. I mean, it just utterly broke me. And I remember, as I am just really considering, like what is going on with my life, I just totally break down. And I remember calling my sister at this time, and I share with my sister what the conversation that I had had with my father and how it affected me. And I just remember saying to my sister, I was like, sis, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was like, I can't live like this anymore. And all of a sudden, the dream that she had from 4 years prior came to mind, along with the promise that I made to God that if he verified the dream that she had, I would go to this discipleship program called Master's Commission. And as all of that flooded back into my mind in that very moment, I said, sis, I think I'm going to go to Master's Commission. Because I was like, I don't want to, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live like this any longer. And so I made that decision that night. I said, God, if you will accept me, if you will take me, then I'm coming home. And so that was like the beginning of a major turning point in my life with God. But Satan was not finished. So before I was to go to this program, Master's Commission, an event took place. I never forget it. This is 2007. It was one of the most major blockbuster fights of the year. And it was Oscar De La Hoya, and I forget who. It's eluding me who he was fighting at the time. He's fighting some guy. And so I went. My mom was going to be having an event at her house. We were going to have a barbecue. We were going to cook, and we were going to watch the fight. So I went to go pick up my childhood best friend, Billy. Now, mind you, whenever I went to his house, his gates were always open, like always open. But this day, when I pulled up to his apartments, the gates were closed. And so as I pulled up to the gates, I'm trying to figure out how to get in, because I've never had to encounter this situation at his apartment complex. And as we are sitting there at the gate and I'm trying to figure out how do I get in, all of a sudden somebody runs up to the passenger window. Now, mind you, it's me and I got about 3 or 4 other homies in the car. And he runs up to the window and he starts throwing up gang signs, and he's like, "What y'all doing in my neighborhood? What you doing in my neighborhood?" And so I kind of look around. I start looking around at my other homies, and I kind of start laughing. I'm like, do you not see how deep this car is? Are you? And his eyes were glazed over, so I could tell he was high off something. And so anyway, he punched my passenger window and blew the entire passenger window out. Now that absolutely angered me. And so we all got out, and of course glass flew in one of my boys' faces who was in the passenger seat. And so anyway, we got out the car, and unfortunately he got beat up. He got beat up bad. And so finally I get into the apartment complex. I pick up my best friend, told him what happened. We are leaving the apartment complex, and I see the same person that we just got finished beating up. I see the same person walking with another friend of his. And I said, "Oh," I said, he brought somebody. I said, "He wants some more." And so I started to turn the vehicle in the direction of where they were, because I was going to pull up alongside where they were. And at that very moment that I'm doing that, my friend grabs the steering wheel and he said, "No, no, no, no." He said, "Look what he's sliding into his pocket." And at that moment I looked, and he was sliding a revolver into his pocket. And at that very moment, me and he's looking up, and me and his eyes connect. So I hit the gas brake. Excuse me, not the gas brake. I hit the gas. And at that moment that I'm hitting the gas, he pulls the revolver out and he unloads the clip, entire clip at my car. And we hit the stop sign. We, make a right, we speed off. And as soon as we get out of Dodge, I'm like, "Is everybody good? Everybody good? Anybody shot?" It's crazy because when we stopped later on to take a look at the car, the 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 man unloaded the entire clip at my vehicle, and not one bullet hit the vehicle. But here's where the grace of God even became realer to me in that moment. If my friend would not have grabbed the steering wheel and pulled and kept me from pulling over to where they were, I would have pulled right up alongside him, and he would have unloaded that clip in my face. And yet the mercy of God was at work, even when, even though he had been drawing me and my heart was moving in this direction, obviously my heart is still not completely right with God. And yet God, in his mercy, is not allowing for me to suffer the full consequences of my decisions. So fast forward, wonderful things are taking place, in my life as I've made this decision, to come to God in that night of my brokenness, in that night of the grief that I experienced. Brokenness is often the birthplace of breakthrough. I want to repeat that. Brokenness is often the birthplace of breakthrough. Often God has to bring us through these experiences that utterly breaks us so that he could birth something new in us, so that he can create a new man in us. And oftentimes in the moment, we don't understand what God is doing in that moment. We don't understand. We want, "God, what are you doing?" And it is in those very moments that God is doing something where he is trying to take us from the level that we are on to a much higher sphere, a much higher level that we would have never reached had not God brought us to a place where we were broken. Even as the scripture says to the prophet Isaiah, that God is nigh, he is near unto those who are of a broken and contrite spirit. And so fast forward, as I've made this decision to give my life to Jesus, I realize, like, if I keep staying in my brother's house, that it's not going to be healthy if I remain there. Because it's girls, drinking, drugs, partying, clubbing. And I just realized if I stay there, it's very likely that this decision that I have made it isn't going to last. And this is, you know, so my sister gave me some advice and she said, pray that God will open up a door for you to um, move out of our brother's house. And so I remember I started going back to church. I ain't been to church in years. And there's a church that I was going to at the time called Phoenix First Assemblies of God, now called Dream City. And anyway, so I go there and they have like these Wednesday night small groups and I'm in a small group trying to get my life right with God, all be it imperfectly, but God is working with my feeble efforts. And I'm in this small group and they're asking, for prayer requests. And I said, listen, I just recently gave my life to God. Just pray that God will open up a door for me so that I can move out of my brother's house into a Christian environment until I can get into this program called Master's Commission. So they prayed for me. And one, I got to back up just to tell you this. So if you're not familiar with Phoenix First Assemblies, it's a mega church. It's a massive church. I mean, literally thousands of members. So on Wednesday night, they would have small groups, but because of how large the church is, there are so many small groups taking place all over the campus. And so I remember as I was looking around, I had all of these small groups to choose from. And I'm looking, and I just finally look at one small group and I say, you know what, I'm gonna go over there. And that literally was the providence of God. Because there was literally, I don't even know, maybe 50, 60, 80 small groups all over the campus. And I could have chosen anyone, but this was the one that God directed me to. So anyway, after they pray for me, one of the guys that's in that small group, he says, hey, I have a house. It's got 3 bedrooms. I already have another guy staying with me. He said, "If you want," he said, "you can come stay with me." I was like, "For real?" He was like, "Yeah." And so I'm like, "Wow, God, wow." Like, wow. At this time, I'm just not as familiar with just how good that God really is. And this is a part of the testimony where I'm finding the father that at that time I had not found in my earthly father. God is beginning to demonstrate that he is the father that I have always wanted or will ever need. And so I move into this, this house, and what's a blessing? It really is reminiscent of a verse in Psalms 68 and verse 6, which says this: God sets the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing. He sets the lonely in families. So at this time, I don't have any Christian families or people that I can look out to, and God says, I got you. I'm gonna take care of you. And it was in that environment that God began to, before I would enter into Master's Commission, that he would begin to do a deep work of healing and transformation in my life. And so moving forward to the next part of my testimony, as I'm waiting to enter into this program, Master's Commission. Now, mind you, it cost $8,000 to get into this program. And at the time that I made a decision to go, I'm broke. I don't got no money. And so I said, okay, God, if you want me to get into this program, like, you won't have to work it out. So the program was like, I don't know, maybe it's about 3 months away, 3, 4 months away when I first gave my heart to God. Maybe longer, maybe it's like 6 months or something. And I said, I'm just gonna try to give me a good job and work and do everything that I could do to try to just save up the money. Cause you had to come in with at least half your tuition, which is $4,000. So I'm working for this company where you look for cable leaks. So I drive all over town. And there was this side of town in Phoenix called Sun City. It's where all the senior citizens live. And so anyway, I'm there. I'm driving around. I remember I'm a brand new Christian. So you're a brand new Christian. You're just like happy go lucky. Everything makes you smile and happy. You just got the joy of the Lord in you. And so I'm literally just waving at everybody as I'm driving down the street, which is just totally different to to who I was prior to that, because I mean, prior to that, I wasn't happy. Prior to that, I was miserable. I was depressed. I felt like there was no purpose to my life. And now I'm full of so much happiness. I'm full of so much joy, which is such a contrast to where I was before. And God was revealing to me, this is what life is like with me. And that is what life is like without me. And so now I had this contrast to look at. And so anyway, I'm waving at people in this city, and I'm not gonna say why the people were so unkind. I can't tell you. I don't know what was going on in their mind, but I'm gonna let you know every single person that I was waving at, none of them were waving back. And so it kind of, dampened my spirits a little. So anyway, I'm at this stop sign and I am trying to plot my next course where I'm going to go. And as I'm at the stop sign, I meet this old man and I wave at him and he waves back to me. And I stick my head out the window. I said, "Thank you so much for waving back." And he was on a bicycle and he came back around and he said, "Why do you say that?" I said, "Well, I've been waving at people in this community all day long and nobody has waved back." And he said, "Maybe that's because they don't have Jesus in their heart." And I said, "You're a Christian?" He was like, "Yeah, I'm a Christian." Now, I sat at that stop sign for about 2 hours listening to this man. I had never heard I had never met anybody like this man in my entire life. I mean, scripture poured out of this guy's mouth like water. And the concepts that he shared with me from scripture, like, was stuff that I had never heard before from anybody. And so, I remember as I was headed to a Wednesday night prayer meeting that night after having met that guy. I pull up to the church and I say, I look up to heaven and I say to God, I say, "God, I want to know the deep things of God. I want to know the things that are not preached from behind pulpits. Like, I want to know what truth is." I want you to keep that up. I want you to keep that in mind because God was to answer that prayer just a year later, where he totally transformed my understanding, my worldview of the Bible and everything that just totally impacted my life. So moving forward, I get it's orientation day for Master's Commission, this program. And I come on orientation day and I only got $1,500. That's all I got. You need 4,000 to get into the program. So I get there, I just go anyway. I said, "God, you said you wanted me here. So if you want me here, you want to make it happen. I don't know how you gonna make it happen, but I'm walking in faith." So they orientation day, you start to speak with the leadership. I gave them the money that I had and I said, "Listen, this is all I got." And they said to me, "It's okay. You can still come in." So I'm like, this is like God is strengthening my faith all along the way that he's got my back. And so I get into the program and it is one of the most impactful years of my life up to that point. The program was such a transformative discipleship program for young people. You weren't even allowed to date your first year because they wanted you to focus on your relationship with God. And you have these different tracks that you could take within the program, whether it's music, whether it's, street ministry, you know, youth pastoring, different stuff like that. And so I took the track that I felt God was leading me to take. And I grew so much that year. I wish I could just go into all of the stories of just the different things that God did with this program to elevate me in my walk with God. And it's amazing. I'm telling you, it's so, so, so amazing what God can do. Because where God calls, provision will follow. Where God calls, provision will always follow. So if God calls you somewhere and you don't know how it's going to work out, if God has called you there, provision will follow. Philippians 4:19 says it like this: My God shall supply all of your needs according to the riches and glory that we have in Christ Jesus. So if God calls you somewhere and you don't know how it's going to work out, provision will follow. So I want to take you to this moment that was a major turning point for me. Major turning point. So I'm at a church service and the pastor is preaching and he talks about brokenness and wounds in our lives that we need to give over to God. And I remember as I'm sitting there, I just remember so clear as day, God speaking to me. Because I knew as the preacher was preaching, I knew that I had not forgiven my father and that I was still holding resentment against him. And I knew that I would never really be able to progress in life and in my walk with God unless I let that thing go. So I remember the Lord speaking to me in that moment, and these were the exact words he said to me. He said, quote, I said, honor your father and your mother. I didn't say honor your father and your mother if they do a good job or if they do a bad job. He said, I simply said, honor your father and your mother. And in that moment, I knew God was calling me to forgive my father. And in that moment, I forgave my father for the first time. And I just said, I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to hold on to the pain. I'm not going to hold on to the resentment and the bitterness that I was holding on to all of those years. And it was the foundation for why I ended up doing so much that I did, because, hurt people hurt people. And as I was hurt and I was operating out of that hurt, it only led me to hurt other people. And, there's this old saying that I heard years ago, which is, I found it to be so true in my own life experience prior to coming to Christ. And the statement goes like this: holding unforgiveness is like drinking poison, hoping that the other person dies. Holding unforgiveness towards someone else is like drinking poison, hoping that the other person dies. And that's exactly what bitterness and unforgiveness and resentment will do to you. Like that person that you hate, they probably not even thinking about you. All the while, the forgiveness and the bitterness and the resentment that you're holding on to is poisoning your own life. It's killing you. It's killing your purpose. It's killing your dreams. It's killing your potential. It's killing your growth. It's killing your destiny. And so in that moment, God was letting me know that if I was going to really move forward in life, if I was really going to move forward in my walk with him, that I had to forgive my father. And so I made that decision. I made that decision to just let go. And later on in life, there was so many things that God revealed to me that allowed for me to heal, better understanding my father's own life story and what happened to him. And just realizing that, people can only give what they have. Like, people can only give to you what they have. If they don't have it, they cannot give it. And so that's the reason why with each new generation, inherited brokenness, we just keep passing it down from one generation to the next until somebody says, the buck stops with me. What was passed on to me from a prior generation, I am not carrying that on into the next generation. And that's something that God started with me, but I realized that it really, man, I realized, I wish I could take you to that moment, because I remember in forgiving my father, it was like a weight came off of me. Like, it was almost like I physically felt the weight just that I had been carrying for all of these years. It was like it just lifted off of me. And that is because, my friends, unforgiveness is bondage and slavery, and forgiveness is freedom. As long as we have bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness in our hearts towards others, we will remain in slavery and bondage. But the moment that we can release people, not making it okay what they did to us, but when we can say, Father, into your hands do I commit this person. I commit them into your hands. I am no longer going to hold anger, bitterness, and unforgiveness in my heart towards them. And when we can get to a point to where we let that go and give it to God, we will experience true freedom, my friends. True freedom. So, in beginning to wrap up my testimony, I want to take you to some closing scenes that are going to segue into um, my testimony, part five of my testimony next week. So, I come to the end of Master's Commission. I mean, it has been a phenomenal program for my walk with God. I've changed so much. Shout out to Pastor Lloyd, Nina Poole, the whole Poole family, and all of the leaders that I had at that time, just people that made a serious impact in my life. And so I come to the end of the program. It's graduation night. I have only been able to pay like 5,000, 4,000, something like that dollars towards my tuition. And I have actually, no, I think it was more like, it was more like 3,000 actually. I think it was up to that point. And so I get called into the office. It's graduation night, and they're asking, so how do you plan on paying the rest of your tuition? And I said, I guess I'll work during the summer and finish paying off my tuition. And they were like, it's not a problem. You can still graduate with everybody else. You just won't be able to get your certificate until it's paid off, which is reasonable. I understand. And so I was like, okay, no problem. And so I left, and I remember kind of having this moment with God. I said, Lord, I said, this whole year, I've been believing that you were going to give me the money to finish paying this thing off. I said, what happened? Did I not have enough faith? Because I've been really believing that you could do this. And I followed that up with saying, I said, but nevertheless, Lord, I said, maybe there's something you're trying to teach me. And I'm just going to trust that somehow you're going to work this out. So we're preparing, we're doing lots of prep work for the graduation ceremony that night. And there's a call on the intercom, and they call like 5 or 6 students, and they say, we need you guys to come and speak with one of the staff members. And I was one of those. So we went over to the side of the church, and the leader said one of the students' parents had given, like, I don't remember what it was, $30,000 or something like that, and to go towards paying off other students' tuitions. And they said, you are one of those students. Your tuition is paid off. And I'm like, what? Like, mind you, I just had this conversation this morning. Mind you, I literally just had this conversation this morning. And I had told God I didn't know how he was going to work it out, but I know he was going to work it out. And I watched God show up and show out on my behalf. And I just remember just the whole night, just walking on cloud nine, because I could not believe it was like 5,000 something dollars. It was just paid off. just like that. And it just really demonstrated to me that he was a father that I could trust. He was a father that I could depend on. He was a father that I could place the full weight of my dependence on, and he would never leave me, nor forsake me, nor fail me. And for a son that did not have the best relationship with his father, I absolutely needed that at that time, to know that he was a father that I could trust, that I could depend on, that I knew would never lie to me, never fail me. And it was exactly, absolutely exactly what I needed. So moving on, wrapping up my story. So the program ends, and I'm hoping to go and do my second year in the program. The second year, you need a little bit less money. You don't need as much. The program is 5,000 at the time for your second year, and I just needed $2,500. So I called the one of the staff leaders, telling them I wanted to do my second year. He told me how much it was. And I told him, I said, listen, I don't have the money. I said, but I'm still going to come because I really believe that God is going to work it out. And he told me, I'd really advise you, do not come down unless you have at least half your money. And so anyway, I'm like, Lord, I really feel like this is what you're telling me to do. And so, I went into seasons of fasting and prayer. Even on one of the days, I prayed 24 hours straight, spending time with God, seeking for his wisdom, seeking for his counsel. And I really felt the impress of God telling me he wanted me to go. I remember that at this church, they have a building on the side of the mountain that they built called the Prayer Pavilion. And it's dedicated specifically to prayer, and it's open for 24 hours. And they have beautiful instrumental music playing all day long. And so I'm at the Prayer Pavilion on the side of the mountain, and I'm praying. And that was the first confirmation I had, is concrete confirmation, let me say, is I was in the room and I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, do you want me to go for my second year? Do you want me to go to Texas? And I hear a voice speak to me and say, do you trust me? And I said, yes, Lord, I trust you. And I made up my mind. I said, I'm going, but I didn't have the money. And so they had told me, don't come down. And so I told him, I called him back. I said, listen, I'm coming down. And he said, don't come if you don't have the money. And I said, listen, I'm coming down not because you've told me that I should come down, but because this is what I feel that God is telling me to do. And so, I'm still a brand new Christian, still a brand new Christian. And I remember, as I'm talking to some of the pastors and different leaders on that campus, one in particular, I remember he was really causing me to doubt whether or not I had heard the voice of the Lord. As he said, why would God tell you to go to a place? You don't got a job. You don't got a place. You don't got a place to stay. He said, I don't know if that was God's voice. I guess, maybe at the time he didn't remember some of the stories in the Bible, God calling Abraham out to a place that he knew not, God calling people to do stuff where they had no means or ways of doing it. And as they walked by faith, God took care of them. Some of those stories probably weren't coming to his mind at the time, but I began to doubt. I was like, because I'm still a new Christian. And I'm like, was that really the voice of God that I heard? Was he the one that really spoke to me? So I went back. And I prayed and I fasted again. I was like, Lord, did I hear your voice correctly? Was that really your voice? And I remember, plain as day, I'm sitting there, I'm praying, I'm seeking after God, and I hear the voice again. Do you trust me? I say, yes, Lord. But something was added this time. Would you leave without the money that you need to go? And I said, God, I don't care if I leave with half a tank of gas. I know that you're going to get me there. And so at this time, like, nothing could shake my faith at that moment. I'm like, okay, I know the voice that I heard. I know this is what God is telling me to do. And all of a sudden, from that point forward, money just started coming in. money just started coming in. And so it was confirming. Matter of fact, the person that was trying to dissuade me, he was one of the people that wrote me a check. He was one of the people that wrote me a check so that I could get to Dallas, Texas. And Dallas, Texas was about to be a turning point in my it was about to be a turning point in my life. So, um, kind of fast, forward, just some of the things that were happening at this time is the enemy, because over the years I can thankfully say in the past at that time, had struggled with depression. That was one of the ways in which Satan always tried to draw me back into darkness, back into old habits. And I remember around that time, I went into this depressive episode. As I went into this depressive episode, my my way for dealing with it before I came to Christ was alcohol. That was just the way that I dealt with it. And so I remember I started to fall back into old sinful habits at this time. And one of my good Christian friends who I'm still friends with to this day, a guy named Lance, shout out to you, Lance, if you happen to be watching this. He saw there was a change in my life. He saw that there was something different. And he had I remember he was just trying to talk to me. And me and him had these conversations. I'm gonna back up and say this. Me and him had these conversations about me going to Dallas, Texas, and how both me and him felt that there was something that God had waiting for me in Dallas, Texas. We didn't know what it was, but we both had this strong impression that God had something special waiting for me there. So I'm back, I'm drinking, I'm fornicating, and I am slow. And this is all happening within a matter of a couple weeks. And I find myself just getting pulled. The enemy's just steadily pulling me back in. And my good friend Lance, one day he's trying to talk to me. He's just trying to talk to me, and he's trying to reason with me. He's like, "What's going on, bro? I know something is wrong. I know something is wrong." I said, "Bro, I just don't want to talk about it. Just leave me alone." And he's pleading with me. He's like, "Bro, I want to be in heaven with you. What is going on?" And I was about to walk out the door, and with the most authoritative voice, he said, "Thus saith the Lord, God has said to you that if you keep walking in the pathway that you are walking, that the great and mighty things that he was about to show you in Dallas, Texas will never happen." And I'm telling you, that shook me. Because like when I say that brother spoke with the authority like of an Old Testament prophet, that's what it sounded like to me. Like that brother spoke with an authority. And it was like an arrow piercing to my heart. And I still left. And I went over to an old friend's house. And I'm at his house and I'm smoking weed. And all of a sudden the spirit just begins speaking to me like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Is this what I've called you to? Is this where I'm bringing you to?" And praise be to God, the Lord helped me to come back to my senses. And I came back to my senses. And so I get the money that I need to make this trip to Dallas, Texas. And I I had something that I thought was going to pay for my second year tuition. So I had a friend that I spoke about I think it was in part one or two of my testimony, Robert Brimmerman. And he lived in Odessa, Texas. And he married a woman, and that woman, awesome woman, Jennifer, her dad worked like in the oil fields, had like a upper management position in the oil fields. So he told me, he said, "Listen, I can get you a job working in the oil fields and you can make really good money." He said, "It's long days, it's hard work. But he said, you can get the money that you need in order to pay for your second year." So now I have the money to get to Texas, gas, food, and all of the, different stuff that I'll need to purchase along the way. And now I have this opportunity to actually make the money that I need to go, my second year. So I start driving. I'm driving, and I'm excited because I believe, like, God, he's shown me so much mercy. He's shown me so much goodness, and he's working in my life. And I'm about 2-3 hours away from Odessa, Texas. And Robert calls me and he said, listen, he said, the Lord will not leave me alone. He said, I got a question to ask you. He said, where has God called you to? Has he called you to Odessa, Texas, or has he called you to Dallas, Texas? And I said, he's called me to Dallas, Texas. He said, then why are you stopping in Odessa? And man, I'm, I'm feeling like a little bit stressed out now. I'm feeling a little bit stressed out because I'm like, Lord, I thought this was the, I thought this was the way that you were gonna provide for me. And so I'm praying, I'm praying, I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Lord, you know, if I drive to Dallas, I don't have nowhere to live. I don't got a job. And I thought you were going to provide for me through this way. So I'm pleading with God to give me guidance and direction. And as I'm driving, I just remember the voice of the Lord speaking to me again. And he said, do you trust me? And I said, yes. He said, then I want you to keep driving. And I said, okay. So I stopped in Odessa for the night. I stayed the night. I went to church with my friend the next morning. And then Monday I was out to Dallas. And so I get to Dallas. I'm there. All along the way, I've been hearing the voice of the Lord lead me all along the way. And now there's silence. I'm praying. I'm asking for guidance. I'm asking for direction, and nothing. Crickets. Silence. And so I'm like, Lord, I'm here now. What do you want me to do? I don't know what to do. I don't got a job. I don't got a place to stay. And he was really, really deepening. He was using these circumstances and situations to deepen my walk with him, to deepen my trust, to learn how to abide in him by faith. So I have to sleep in my car. And I'm sleeping in my car. But I had made up my mind that even though I didn't know what God was doing, that I was going to trust him. So I'm sleeping in my car. I remember my car was so packed, I couldn't even lean my seat back to get like a full night's, like a comfortable rest. But every day that I woke up, I just remember the joy of the Lord that was in my heart. And I would spend time studying my word, or spend time in prayer, and then I would go out witnessing to people, to tell them about Jesus. And I didn't know what the future held at that moment. I just knew somehow God was he was going to take care of me. So I'm there. I'm in my car for less than a week. And God provides a place for me to stay. And about a week or two after that, he provides a job. And he's just showing me why he is a father that I can trust in. And as I wrap it up, I want to let you know just something extremely important for us as men to remember. And that is that sonship is the foundation of true manhood. I'm going to repeat that. Sonship is the foundation of true manhood. True manhood cannot begin without you realizing the sonship that you sustain to your father. Because keep in mind, every child, every son becomes what he becomes as he learns it from his father. He takes his identity from his father. He takes his mannerisms from his father, personality, characteristics, work ethics, so many different things he takes from his father. And when we have given our lives over to Jesus Christ, and we repent and we confess our sins, and he removes us from being dead in trespasses and sins, we are born again and we become sons of God. And that sonship lays at the foundation of the road that we travel to become the man that God has called us to be. So I want to leave you with these last few reflection questions. The first is this: are you holding on to pain or unforgiveness that's blocking your freedom? Are you holding on to pain or unforgiveness that is blocking your freedom? Something that's keeping you in bondage, something that is keeping you in slavery, not allowing for you to reach your full potential. Here are some reflection questions. Number 2, where is God asking you to walk by faith, even when the path looks uncertain? Where is God asking you to walk by faith, even when the path looks uncertain? Where is God calling you out to? In your experience, like he did with Abraham, where God called him out into a place where he didn't know where he was going. Where is God calling you to walk by faith, even if you do not understand what he is doing, but he is leading you by his voice and he is calling you to trust him to walk out into some new season of life, some path where he is calling you to walk by faith? Where is that area of your life? And my final and third reflection question is this: how do you define manhood or identity? And how have you allowed God to redefine it for you? I'm going to repeat. How do you define manhood or identity? Better yet, I can say, how did you define it in the past? And how have you allowed for God to redefine it for you? I would love for that third question to see your comment in the comment section. What you viewed about manhood prior to coming to Christ and how he redefined that for you. Well, my friends, you have tuned in to part 4 of my testimony, the turning point, faith, forgiveness, and the Father that I never knew. I really appreciate you guys coming out and spending time with me today. I pray that there was something in my story that spoke to your heart. Maybe it was the piece about forgiveness and how forgiveness is so absolutely important to being liberated and being able to move forward in life. Maybe it was the piece about God being the Father that you never had, or that sonship is the foundation of all true manhood. Whatever it is that spoke to you today, if it was something that touched your heart, it's my prayer that you would share this testimony with somebody else, because if it's been a blessing to you, it most certainly will be a blessing to them. Well, thank you for coming out today. I pray that you will tune in next Friday for part 5 of my testimony. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and salute to all of my fellow soldiers on the battlefield of manhood. God bless.